Galbrena is coming to Wuthering Waves, and as someone who absolutely adores her for being blatantly female Nero from Devil May Cry 5, I've been thinking a lot about what she might do. So in this video I'm going to be making some speculations about Galbrena's kit. Starting with, as usual, what do I believe her attribute and weapon type are going to be? Starting with weapon type because I believe this one is a little bit more obvious. For her weapon type, I believe that Galbrena is going to end up being a pistol character. Now I know I've been tricked before by characters using a weapon but then being a different weapon, but a pistol is like an actual weapon within Wuthering Waves. Zani's greatsword really doesn't have the same structure as the broad blades we can equip, so her having a different weapon type can be justified a little bit. But in Galbrena's first ever promotional art, she was blatantly just using a pistol, and we even see her using a shotgun-esque pistol in the ending of the 2.6 story, which, fun fact, Nero from Devil May Cry also uses one. Which just goes to show that this entire character is just going to end up being a Nero reference, which in my opinion is a good thing. Speaking of Nero, if she is not a pistol character, I can definitely see Broadblade, because, well, Nero also uses a very big sword. And like I said before, between the wings, the general design, and the shotgun-esque pistol, I genuinely believe this character is taking as much from Nero as possible, and I believe that this will also apply towards her combat. But I feel like if I were to discuss Devil May Cry combat now, this entire video is just going to end up being about Devil May Cry. So let's move on to what I believe her attribute is going to be. Now, I'm not super clear on this yet. I do have two possible ideas, one of which being Arrow and the other one being Fusion. This is because there is currently two unused echoes in the game when it comes to stat boosting echoes. First being Fenrico, the first one being Fenrico, which buffs arrow and heavy attack damage and deals arrow damage, and the other one being the Kurorasaur, which deals fusion damage, is on a fusion set, and buffs fusion and echo skill damage. Both arrow and fusion sound equally plausible to me. I feel like fusion is a little weird, because we just got the mono fusion team completed, and if she does end up being fusion and use Kurorasaur, that means that there is a high chance that she ends up being a fusion DPS, and will get a second fusion archetype. But we do have something similar for if she ends up being arrow and uses Fenrico. Fenrico was added to the Law of Harmony set, meaning that whoever uses Fenrico is going to end up being a support for an echo skill based character. Flelova is the only current echo skill based DPS that we have, so if Galbrena ends up being a support for Flelova, that's going to be a little bit weird, because she doesn't have the perfect synergy that Rocha and Cantarella have with her. Which ultimately means that I believe that whoever ends up using Kurorasaur and whoever ends up using Fenrico are going to end up making a team together. I believe Galbrena to be one of these characters, and considering her popularity and similarities to Nero, I believe she would be the DPS, making her a fusion character who does primarily echo skill damage and uses the Kurorasaur. Whoever is going to end up using Fenrico and the Law of Harmony set is most likely going to be the other character releasing in 2.7. So that leaves me with Galbrena being a fusion DPS who focuses on echo skill damage. Like I said before, she can still be an arrow character who is meant to buff echo skill damage, but I'm not as confident in this theory because, honestly, spoilers for the ending of the first quest of 2.6, but Galbrena seems to be hunting the Frenodian. And hunting Leviathan sure sounds like a DPS role to me. Sure, you can argue that Lupa ended up not being a main DPS, but Lupa has an entirely different gimmick where she primarily fights with teams and is all about cooperation and teamwork, so her being a more supportive character who still has large personal damage makes perfect sense with her story. Kuro has always done a good job at making character kits reflect the kind of characters they are within the lore and within the world of Wuthering Waves. So Galbrena being a main DPS simply just makes way more sense to me. Speaking of which, it's now time to get into my favorite part of these videos, being speculating how Galbrena is going to end up playing, for which I'm gonna go with the assumption that Galbrena is a fusion main DPS focused on dealing primarily echo damage. And if she does end up doing a lot of echo damage, this would imply that much like Flelova, she does end up having a summon. I don't know what she would summon, but I feel like it'll have to do with that voice that spoke to her during the end of the 2.6 main quest about Augusta. You know, the one that asked what the next prey was. I feel like that's going to be the thing that Galbrena ends up summoning, maybe with her ultimate or like a skill or something like that. But I also feel like Galbrena is going to be a very big fighter of her own. Like, she doesn't just rely on her summon to do the work, she gets into that battlefield herself and decides to knock some enemies around. Galbrena just doesn't give me that vibe of the type of character to run away from threats and let someone else handle it. So maybe we'll get something akin to a joint attack, where they're working together and attacking at the same time. It's just that they're two separate entities on the field. That sounds a lot closer to what I feel like Galbrena would fight like. Another thing I would really like to see in Galbrena's kit, which, you know, this is simply me making a Nero reference again, but I really hope that Galbrena will grab the enemies. Like, make a massive hand and just grab them. Maybe do that with her liberation, because Nero has this devil arm that he uses to grab enemies. And in both of the Devil May Cry games that Nero is featured in, this is a pretty big part of his playstyle. So considering just how much this character is already taking from Nero, I feel like they'll just have to implement that in some way. If they don't, that's completely fine as well. Another thing they could add is a sort of timing mechanic like Nero's Rev Blade. For the context of people who haven't played Devil May Cry 5, Nero has a Rev Blade that he's able to rev up to increase the attack power of his sword. And with one of the upgrades, if you press a button at the perfect time, you immediately get the maximum upgrade without having to wait. And I think it would be incredibly cool if Galbrena had a similar mechanic, where she has to press a button at the exact correct time in order to get a massive upgrade in her damage. Maybe don't make the upgrade too massive, because Galbrena still has to be playable by people that aren't that good at the game, or simply aren't that good with timing. But simply adding a timing mechanic that rewards skill will, in my opinion, make Galbrena a lot more fun to use for a lot of people. Another thing that I would like to see from Galbrena is aerial combat. Now, I don't mean like Jinshi or like Camellia, where you're essentially just floating. I would like to see a character that's able to really do disgusting combos and stall their time in the air by using specific attacks. Man, it really sounds like I'm just describing Devil May Cry gameplay. Anyway, considering the fact that Galbrena has wings, I feel like it's not far-fetched to assume that she might have some aerial combat. Galbrena's wings could be the perfect excuse to really make her feel like a Devil May Cry character. We also know that Kuro is completely open to doing things like this, because in Punishing Grey Raven, we have a collab that added the Devil May Cry characters. So honestly, I don't think it's too far-fetched to assume that Galbrena is gonna play like a Devil May Cry character. Obviously, I don't think she's going to play the exact same way as Virgil, Dante, or Nero. Her mechanics could also just be entirely way off and have nothing to do with Devil May Cry. But as long as she feels good to play with a combo-centric playstyle that gives you a lot of freedom of movement, they're still going to give you the ability to feel what it's like to play Devil May Cry, even if she ends up being less skill-based than a Devil May Cry character. As long as they're able to make Galbrena feel like a Devil May Cry character, she's going to be incredibly fun to use. And considering just how many similarities she has to Nero, there is no doubt in my mind that Kuro wants to make that reference as realistic as possible. Kuro loves Devil May Cry, and I don't think they're gonna just make a character with this many references and then not have it translate over into gameplay. Devil May Cry is also a massive franchise, and thus a lot of people are going to appreciate it if Galbrena ends up feeling just as fun and just as dynamic and just as combo heavy as a Devil May Cry character. But those are just my thoughts on what Galbrena might play like. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, check out the link in my description to join my Discord. There's a pretty good chance I'll respond to your question there. If you just want to see more of me, check out my second channel in which I primarily cover Punishing Grey Raven, but I kinda just make videos about whatever I feel like. But that'll be all from me. Peace.